Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about a new OCD tool that you can use to help your kids practice their skills at home. We'll talk about why it's so important for our kids, teens, and young adults to practice their skills on a consistent basis, what the barriers are to that, and how this tool can help you. But before we get started, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That is treatmyocd.com. I will also leave a link in the show notes. So let's talk about this tool. This is actually a new OCD tool that I created. And I wanted to create something that you could use interactively at home. And I did just come out with my workbook, Crushing OCD Workbook for Kids. And I also have a course, I have to kind of think about these titles, Crushing OCD Class for Kids and Teens. So I have those two resources. One is an online, on-demand course that your kids, teens, young adults can take. You can find that at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. And I just came out with a book that is for kids ages 7 to 12 called Crushing OCD Workbook for Kids. You can find that on Amazon or natashadaniels.com/OCD book. But I wanted to give you a really fun, interactive tool that can then sharpen those skills. That course and that book provide the skills. But then what do we do in between? Just like if your child is going to therapy, I've noticed with my own kids, especially my son, to be honest, that it's in between sessions that nothing is happening. And as parents, that's kind of where we kind of worry about filling in the gap. You know, we see maybe your child is engaged, like my son is engaged in therapy and he's participating and he'll do exposures, but then outside of therapy, it's crickets. And so how do we keep that consistent without being a nag and feeling like we are kind of babysitting it and owning it for our kids? That is a big problem. And so I created an OCD Card Deck. And my idea was that a person struggling with OCD, and actually this card deck is for any age. It's for adults. It's for, I would say, kids ages 8 and up. The younger you go, the more you'll have to kind of navigate with them. The older they get, this could be one of those things that you give them and they do on their own. But the idea is that they would pick a card every day and they would do what the card says. And I'm going to go into the 4 different categories that I cover in the card deck and what skills I'm targeting in each category. But first, I want to talk about the purpose of the deck. So I created it because I did feel like there was a gap in consistent skill building in between therapy sessions. So it's a great tool for therapists to be able to offer their clients. I also think there is a gap even as parents in how to consistently get our kids to use their skills and practice their skills. And I also feel like there are areas that most therapy sessions do not cover. Areas such as their self-esteem, their ongoing motivation, their ongoing involvement of family members. And so as I talk to you about the different categories in this card deck, you'll see where I'm touching on those things, because I feel like there's multiple areas where OCD impacts other people, self-esteem, and the dip in motivation. And if we don't keep addressing those and working on those, then the wheels can fall off. And so the idea is that you get this card deck And the cards are, you can go and check them out online. They're at OCDCardDeck.com. I actually made a video that kind of goes through the card deck, shows you the cards, and talks about how to use the card deck, kind of similar to this episode. And you'll see that the card decks are a little bit bigger, and so that they're easier to read, easier to handle. And the idea would be that you shuffle them, and first you want to talk to your child and make sure that they're wanting to use the card deck. Here's a tool. You can offer an incentive. If you pick a card each day, you can earn bravery points or whatever incentive programs you have, just to make it even more fun. But shuffle the deck, and then they just draw a card, a random card every day. And the cards, depending on what category of a card they pull, will tell them different things. And I'll talk about some of the examples. And the idea is that they're not always doing something scary or that provokes some discomfort. So, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want the card deck to be this really scary thing that every time they see the deck, they're like, oh gosh, there's that deck again. That deck that, tortures me. That's not the goal of the deck. And so there are different types of cards in there. And depending on what they pull is what they'll cover. And the goal is to get them to touch on these different things. So the categories, the first obvious category is an action card. And they're different color headings, so you can kind of clearly see what card you're pulling. The action card is more of your classic cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure response prevention type of skill. And so when you pull an action card, it might tell you to do something. I'll give you an example. It might say something like, draw a picture with sayings or images OCD would not like. That's one of the cards. There are 12 cards for each category, and there are 4 categories. So there are plenty of skills to be built in each category. In each card, I also have a reflection section. So there's an action or a thought for them to think about throughout the day. And I'll give you some examples. I'll read some of these cards. And then on the same card, there's a reflection. And the reflection is to come back at the end of the day, and it's an extra question. And if you have kids who are not gung-ho about the deck, you don't have to do the reflection part. Those could be bonus points. If you have someone who's wanting and willing to work on their stuff, then definitely circle back. So it's like something that you would do. You'd pull the card at the very beginning of the day, and when the day is wrapping up and you're ending the day, you go back to the reflection section and you read it. And like I said before, I actually made this deck to be universal, that adults can use this deck and kids can use this deck, teenagers can use this deck. This really is a ageless deck because it's very simple and you can go as in-depth as you want depending on your age. So for that action card that I just read, draw a picture with sayings or images OCD would not like, the reflection is, how did it feel to make an image that triggered OCD? Can you hang it up in your house to upset OCD even more? Right? So it's kind of pushing them even a little bit further. And these are all based on clinically sound, evidence-based approaches in tackling OCD. And so they're not just random, they're purposely designed to supplement ERP therapy if you're in exposure response prevention type of therapy. They're there to support you if you're learning these skills at home, if you're taking one of my courses, reading one of my books, or just doing it yourself, reading a book and providing that resource. This is meant to support those evidence-based approaches. So that's the first category, action. I'll read you another action card just so you can get a flavor of this. Here's another one. Make a list of all the compulsions you do today. This will bring awareness to what OCD is making you do to grow it. It can also be helpful to work through this list to reduce your compulsions one at a time. So again, the idea is that your child, teen, or young adult, or yourself, already has the basic OCD skills. This deck is not a teaching tool. It is a skill building tool. And so it's not meant to teach you ERP. It's not meant to teach you how to crush OCD. That is what my course is for. And that is what my book is for. And that is what therapy is for. So lots of avenues to learn your skills. This is a supplement. This is meant to then make you practice those skills. So going back to that action card, at the end of the day, you go back. The reflection is, was the list longer or shorter than you thought? Because a lot of people minimize how many compulsions they do. And a lot of people think it's so much. And so getting this gauge of how much time is OCD really consuming in my day is bringing that awareness and bringing that reality so that they're motivated to work on their stuff. All right, so those are action cards, and there are 12 of those. Moving from there, I have motivation cards. And the motivation card is designed to address and keep abreast of their level of motivation to work on their OCD. What is this barrier to their motivation? What is keeping them stuck? What things prevent them from doing the hard things to crush their OCD? And that's what the motivation card does. It gets them to ponder this. It gets them to explore how motivated they're feeling and to really think about that. So let me give you an example of a motivation card. Here's one. Write yourself a letter of encouragement. Imagine you're writing it to a friend. So that is a tool so that when they are having a hard time, they can go back and they can read their letter again. So at the end of the day, after they write their letter and they come back for the reflection part of the card, I wrote, was it hard to write a letter of encouragement to yourself? And why do you think that is? Right? So we're getting at the heart of, why is it hard for you to be your own cheerleader? You can cheerlead your friend, but it's sometimes hard for us to cheerlead ourselves. And what is that about? And let's explore that. And that's what that card is getting to the heart of. And the cool thing about this deck is it can be used over and over again. So there are 48 cards. So that's 48 days if you're pulling one every day, or if you pull one just every other day, it goes a little bit longer. But they are things that you can ponder and do a lot over time. And so there's nothing that you can't like circle back and do again. Does this look different this time? Or do I want to skip this card? So lots of options in how to use it. Let me read you one more motivation card. So here's another one. Today, record a video encouraging your future self and watch it on days when you're feeling hopeless. So similar to the letter, just another way of providing some tools for them to watch to inspire themselves in the future. The reflection is this something you can watch from time to time when you are struggling? How will you remember to do it? So the other thing I wanted to incorporate in this deck is consistency and getting people to think, how am I going to, giving them new skills, new resources, right? I've got a letter, I've got a video I can watch when I'm feeling discouraged. How am I going to remember to use it? When we just tell people, make a note or set a reminder to use this when you're feeling sad, or make a sticky note, they won't remember that. But when you ask them, how will you remember to do that? That gets the brain churning, and people are much more likely to follow through when they're the ones creating their own reminder. When I'm talking to my son, who also has ADHD, instead of saying to him, okay, don't forget that you've got a teacher call at 2 p.m. because he's doing online school, and sometimes twice in every subject he has to meet with the teacher one-on-one. And so instead of saying like, I wrote down a reminder on the whiteboard, or don't forget your call at 2, I'll say to him, okay, you have a call at 2. How are you going to remember to listen for that with your phone, or something like that? And then he'll tell me, I'll set a reminder on my phone, or I'll make a little sticky note on my desk. And then that will happen more likely than if I just told him that I was going to remind him or what he needed to do to remember. It kind of like they zone you out. So I wanted to include things that were getting people to think. Okay, so those are 2 of the 4 cards. Moving from there, I really wanted to talk about the loved one support. And so for parents, when you're giving this deck to your kids, this is you. You're the primary support. The caregiver is the primary support. But I wanted it to be a deck where if the partner, like your husband or your wife, was your support, or your roommate was your support, I really wanted the deck to be very age neutral. But for those of you that are listening that are probably going to use it for your kids, teens, and young adults, this would be how they interact with you. And I think often we forget to mention that or touch on that in detail in therapy is what about the helpers? The caregivers are a big part of the world of OCD, and getting a person with OCD to realize and recognize that OCD doesn't stay in its bubble and that it's impacting the people around them, I think is really important. We want healthy family systems. So I really wanted to include a card that they pull that works on that relationship on some level. So let me give you some examples on those. Here's a support card. And they're different colors so that you can see. So the motivation card is kind of like a purplish, it's got like a weird gradient color, purple and orange. The action cards are hot pink. The support cards are yellow. So they can kind of see it when they pull it out, and you can kind of separate the categories. So here's an example of a support card. Today, pay attention to how often your OCD demands your loved ones do something for OCD. And again, that's separating them from their OCD. OCD does demand that people do things for it, and separating out OCD and seeing that OCD is bossing your family around too is really important. And I think a lot of times people aren't even aware to what extent OCD is involving their family. Come back for a reflection at the end of the day. Were you surprised at how often OCD wanted your loved ones to do something, right? Becoming aware outside of yourself. How is this impacting other people? How often is my OCD wanting other people to do things to grow my OCD? That's really important awareness, because as parents, yes, we can pull back our enabling of OCD compulsions, but having the buy-in and the awareness of the person who's, getting hooked in and his OCD is demanding makes the road a lot easier. If they have the awareness of, oh, my mom really shouldn't answer that question because it's growing my OCD loop, and I'm owning my journey, and I don't want anyone to grow my OCD and make me pedal faster trying to get OCD away. I rather be able to crush it, and that means that my parents have to help me too. That's the goal anyway. I want to read one more support card. Here is another one. Pick one OCD rule you will let a family member break today. That one might be tough, right? But we're giving them the steering wheel, and we're saying, you pick. What's one thing that your family won't do today for your OCD? Let's give it a try. And the reflection, was that easier or harder than you thought? And I mean, you could incorporate this with a bravery point system where they earn points for doing some of these exercise-oriented cards. Like that's an exercise-oriented card, or writing a letter for yourself, or doing a video, or writing a list of your compulsions, right? Those are very exercise-oriented. And so you can give them 2 points or 3 points. And I do have a whole podcast on how to set up an effective incentive program. And that is episode 123. So if you go to my website at atparentingsurvival.com, scroll to the bottom, or if you're on the phone, go to the menu and go to the search button and just type in 123 and it will pop up for you. That is really the easiest way to find my podcast episodes, is on my website.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
it's helpful for our kids to hear it from this like third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of like holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was like the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do like the exposures. Before it was like really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
I do think incorporating bravery points or incentives is important while using the card deck, because there will be some harder things to do, and we can offer more points for them to do it. Some are really simple and don't require them to do anything, and some things do require them to take an action or do an exercise. Okay, the final category that I thought was so important to touch on is their self-esteem. And I call them worthy cards because I want them to feel worthy. I want them to feel worthy regardless of their OCD struggle. And often OCD therapy is so specific and so ERP based and skill building based that therapists just don't have the time in that session to cover the family dynamics, the family enabling of OCD compulsions, the self-esteem and worthiness that a person feels because of OCD. It's a lot to cover. And so some of these things don't get covered to the extent that they need to be. And partly it's because ERP can take a whole session. So building those skills and addressing those outside of therapy, or if you're not doing therapy, addressing it as part of the work that you're doing to create a therapeutic home environment is really important. And so I wanted my final category to be worthy cards. And worthy cards are building their self-identity and their self-worth. So here is an example of a worthy card. What is one positive word you would use to describe yourself? Example, trustworthy, funny, smart, creative, right? Trying to get them to start to have an identity of who they are, not what they're good at, but what is a personality trait that they would describe themselves as. Reflection. Was it hard to come up with a positive word to describe yourself? If so, why do you think that is? I know when I've worked with a lot of people who have a poor self-image or poor self-esteem, they can't even come up with a positive word to describe themselves. They really struggle with that. And so it's kind of set up on purpose. Are you going to struggle with coming up with a word? And really, the purpose of the card is to explore why. Isn't that interesting that you had a hard time coming up with a positive word for yourself? And why do you think that is? I want to do, the last one is another worthy card, but I want to show you an example of it's just a quote. It's just a thought. And the idea is when they pull this and it's just a statement, that they take that statement with them throughout the day and they think about it. And if you're a parent and you're doing the deck with your child, it might be something that you prompt throughout the day. And you can do a lot of things off the deck. It could be a theme for the day. For any of the categories, that could be the theme. Oh, we're working on, family involvement with your OCD today. Or, oh, we're working on you making a list of compulsions and looking at compulsions today. And you can even offer other activities and other skill building around that theme each day. So it's a really good launching pad for what you're going to focus on that day. But some of the cards are literally just a statement. And so they're not all hard work. A lot of them are just, let me ponder this. Definitely in the motivation and the worthy category, there are some just pondering type of cards. Here is one of them. It's a worthy card. And it says, OCD is only a small part of your journey through life. You are more than your OCD. So that would be something that maybe you would reflect on with your child. What do you think the card means by that? In what way are you more than your OCD? In what way is your life really full and complete outside of OCD? So you can kind of use this as a launching pad to ask other questions, or even just casually have conversations around that throughout the day or at the end of the day. They come back and there's a reflection part of the card. Does OCD take over your life? What other areas of your life can you give your attention and focus? So that is kind of a very passive ACT question, acceptance, commitment, therapy, looking for their values, looking for their purpose. When people find purpose and enjoyment, that takes the power away from OCD. And so getting them to see that their life is more than OCD, and where can they put their positive attention? What lights them up? What is interesting? We don't do that to distract ourselves or to drown out OCD. We do that because OCD dominates so much of our life already. Where can we be lit up? Where can we find joy and happiness? Because just because OCD is bossy and is trying to demand all of our attention, we don't have to give it all of our attention. We can focus on things that light us up, give us love, and make us happy. And so that's what that card is doing. It's trying to get them to see that there is more to life than OCD, and where can they find their passion or ignite that passion. Okay, so that's the deck. What do you think of that? I would love to hear from you. I'm really excited about it. You can order it. It's on Etsy. In my Etsy shop, you can find it at natashadaniels.com/shop. It is called the OCD Card Deck, and so you should see it in my shop. You can also go to my website, it's OCDCardDeck.com if you want to watch the video, and there is a link there to buy the cards. It will take you to Etsy. Interesting side note, after we made the card deck, I made the card deck, and I was like, where am I going to put the card deck? Where am I going to sell the card deck? It's like all these like practical things you don't really think about when you're creating a physical product. And I was like, well, Etsy, because, my son had an Etsy store a long time ago. He doesn't do it anymore. That's disappointing, but that's okay. And so I know how to set up an Etsy store, and it's easy and everybody knows it. And so I was like, I'll just do Etsy. But I was like, I'm just not going to sell a card deck. And then I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I sold like inspirational mental health t-shirts and sweatshirts and bags that was like a little bit more specific to anxiety and OCD. And I asked my youngest daughter, if she wanted to help design them. And so we had so much fun designing t-shirts, sweatshirts, and canvas bags with inspirational stuff that, she created a couple of them. One is called, she created the Defeater OCDer, and you'll see it. It's really cute. She also made a t-shirt that's the Destroyer of Fears. She made another one called Love Yourself. And then I made a bunch. Proud Mother to an OCD Warrior. There's from Worrier to Warrior. There's an OCD Warrior, One Brave Battle at a Time. So there's tons of them. We had a lot of fun with it. We had too much fun with it. And so there are t-shirts, there are sweatshirts, and there are canvas bags, because I know not everybody's going to want to wear these things, but they might want to have a bag. So when you go check out the OCD Card Deck, check out the t-shirts, sweatshirts, and bags as well. I hope that you find them fun and cool. And just so that you know, the OCD Card Deck it's separate. And so the people that print my card decks and distribute them are a completely different company than the people that print my t-shirts and sweatshirts and the bags. So if you're buying t-shirts, sweatshirts, or bags, it will be one company and it'll be mailed out in one package. And the OCD Card Deck will be mailed out in another package because they are two separate distribution companies, if that makes sense. Here's the other bad news, and I'm sorry about this, but you can buy, doesn't matter where you are in the world, for the t-shirts and the sweatshirts and the bags. The OCD Card Deck, that company, having issues with them mailing things internationally that is affordable. It was like $20 for them to mail out this small little card deck to anything outside of the US. And that's ridiculous. I don't want you paying $20 to get a card deck on top of the price of the card deck. And so if there is a huge interest in getting the card deck and you're not in the United States, you can go to my website and fill out a form. So if you go to ocdcarddeck.com, and then underneath, when you go to the website and it says the OCD Card Deck, and then there's like a little button that says get your deck. And it says underneath there, currently we only ship inside the US. If you want to request a deck for international delivery, click here. And it will bring you to a Google form. And I am collecting names and addresses for people who want a deck internationally. And if I get enough and it's worth it, I will talk to the distributor and I will actually just mail them out myself. I'll just go and get a bulk order from them and I will mail them out. But I don't want to be running to the post office every day. So that's why we'll see if it's worth it and how much it would cost for me to mail it out so that it's affordable for you. But just fill out that form if you're interested. But if you live in the US, no worries. You can get the card deck. So check that out at natashadaniels.com/shop and check out the cool t-shirts and logos that we created. And I would love your feedback on that as well. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that the tool is another helpful thing that you can add to your arsenal of what we offer our kids, because that's all we can do is offer our kids these tools. And maybe if you have OCD, you offer yourself this tool to sharpen your skills. And we can't control whether they use them, but we can control whether we provide them with these. That's what I always say to my son. I was trying to get him to sign up for something else today. And he's like, Mom, you signed me up for the ADHD group and I didn't like that. And you signed me up for this and I didn't like that. And I was like, look, as a parent, all I can do is sign you up for these things in hopes that something will help. And when you said you didn't like the ADHD group, you didn't have to go back. And so, but I wouldn't be doing my due diligence as a mom to not continually provide you with these opportunities to grow and learn and build these skills so that you have the best life that you can have. And then I think I made him feel bad because he was like, I know, thanks, Mom. But that's true, right? That's all we can do is provide our kids with resources, and then they pick them up or they don't. We can offer incentives and make it really enticing. But that's what I'm trying to help you with is, here's a course, here's a workbook, here now are cards that you can do and turn it into kind of a game and make it fun. And so I hope that you find that helpful. I hope that you find the podcast helpful in general. If you do, don't forget to leave a star and rate the podcast. I always appreciate that. And to show my gratitude, I always try to read one if there is a new one, and there is a new one. I want to thank Purple Tracy, who is from Canada, and wrote worth every episode. I follow many podcasts, and Natasha's is the one I will never miss. I learned so much from her and her real life, straightforward approach. Natasha is able to make the complex and complicated life of parenting a child with severe mental health needs much less confusing and overwhelming. And for this, I am forever grateful for her. I've recommended this podcast to so many people, and they also tell me how helpful it has been. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to write that and then to tell other people that this podcast is valuable. I really appreciate that and appreciate you writing the review. And for you guys, maybe if you write a review, I'll be reading yours next time. So don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.